Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're digging into something really fascinating. It's about Canada's kind of surprising role in the global race for critical minerals. It's this mix of geology, big money, and, well, some pretty tense international relations.
Yeah, and our main source for this is a report called Canada's Critical Minerals, a geopolitical opportunity. It's really packed with insights into how things are shifting globally. Our mission really is to pull out the key takeaways for you, the surprising bits about how Canada might just become this cornerstone for critical minerals in the democratic world, and also what roadblocks it's facing.
It's quite something when you look at why these minerals are suddenly, well, so critical. You've got this intensifying tech rivalry, mainly U.S. versus China, and China strategically has been using its grip on these minerals as leverage, really, tools of coercion. Just think back in December 2024, they slapped an export ban on gallium, germanium, and antimony heading to the U.S.
Those are key for high-tech stuff, right? Semiconductors, defense. Exactly. Things like advanced chips, solar panels, even night vision. Basically, the guts of modern tech and defense. And then, just a few months later, April 2025, they tightened the screws even more. This time on rare earth magnet exports, specifically targeting the U.S. and NATO allies.
So not just trade disputes, this is strategy.
Oh, absolutely. It's a clear strategic play. And when you look at the numbers, China processes like over 90% of the world's rare earths. Plus, they handle more than 70% of graphite anode production that's crucial for EV batteries, and over 60% of cobalt refining, mostly from ore source in the Congo.
Wow. Okay, so that really paints a picture of dependence.
It does. It makes it crystal clear why everyone's scrambling for new, reliable supply chains. The reliance is just, well, huge.
So given China's basically weaponizing these exports, what are other countries doing? The U.S., the EU, Japan. What's their response? Is there a coordinated pushback?
Yes, definitely. We're seeing some pretty quick and coordinated countermoves. The U.S. dusted off its Defense Production Act. They updated it in 2022 and again in 2024 specifically to funnel investment into mining and processing, both at home and, importantly, with allies.
Allies like Canada, presumably.
Exactly. And the EU, they passed their Strategic Raw Materials Act in 2023. It explicitly names Canada as a priority partner. They want that supply chain security. And then you have broader G7 initiatives pushing for what they call friendshoring, basically building these secure mineral alliances only with trusted partners.
Okay, so that brings us squarely to Canada.
Sure.
Why Canada specifically? I mean, other countries have minerals too, right? What gives Canada this unique position? Is it just the rocks in the ground?
That's a really good point. It's not just the geology, though. That's a massive advantage. Canada really does have amazing reserves. It ranks globally for a lot of these key minerals. Top 10 for lithium, with big deposits in Quebec, Manitoba, Ontario.
Lithium, crucial for batteries.
Crucial. Then nickel, they're top 5. Again, Ontario, Manitoba, Quebec. Cobalt reserves. Top 3 globally, mainly Ontario and the Northwest Territories.
Look.
Quebec's got huge graphite potential. And we're seeing these new rare earth hubs emerging, especially in Saskatchewan and the NWT. That's really exciting.
So the potential is definitely there geologically. But you said it's more than that.
Yeah, beyond just the resources, Canada brings stability. Rule of law, predictable regulations, relatively high environmental and labor standards. And in today's world, that ethical sourcing angle, the ESG aspect, it's becoming more and more important to manufacturers and consumers. That gives Canada an edge over some other resource-rich regions.
That makes sense, a stable, reliable partner.
Yeah.
So it sounds great on paper, the potential's huge, but is anything actually happening? Are there real projects getting off the ground?
Oh, yes. It's not just potential. There are several key projects moving towards production pretty quickly. We're talking commissioning between, say, 2025 and 2028. Nemaska Lithium in Quebec, for example. They're aiming to get their mine and processing plant going by 2026.
Okay, that's soon.
Very soon. And up in the Northwest Territories, Vital Metals is already producing some rare earth concentrate. Then there's First Cobalt in Ontario. They're upgrading their refinery to produce battery-grade cobalt. That's a big step towards, moving up the value chain.
Right, not just shipping out raw ore.
Exactly. And maybe one of the most significant developments is the Saskatchewan Research Council, the SRC. They're building Canada's first ever commercial rare earth separation plant.
So actually separating those complex rare earths domestically.
Precisely. That's a huge piece of the puzzle. So yes, real tangible progress is being made. Things are moving.
Okay, so the potential is real. Projects are underway.
Mm-hmm.
But let's talk about the flip side. What are the hurdles? The report mentions bottlenecks and risks.
Right.
What could actually stop Canada from realizing this opportunity?
Yeah, you're right to ask. Despite all the positive, there are some significant challenges, big ones. First off, permitting. Getting a project approved can take, well, way too long, often 10, maybe even 15 years.
15 years,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. Now, the federal government says they want to get that down to under 5 years by 2026. But making that happen consistently across different provinces and territories, that's proving tricky. Implementation is uneven.
Okay, so red tape is a big one. What else?
Well, another huge factor is indigenous consultation and partnership. Most of these mineral deposits are on or near indigenous lands, and First Nations groups are increasingly demanding more than just consultation. They want real equity stakes, co-management, and what's being called environmental sovereignty.
So a fundamental shift in how these projects are developed.
Exactly. It's not just about ticking a box anymore. But there is some positive movement. We are seeing some landmark agreements, like in the Ring of Fire area in Ontario, that point towards genuine co-development models. So there's hope, but it's complex.
What other bottlenecks?
Infrastructure,
Yeah.
especially in the north. Think about the Northwest Territories, Nunavut, the Yukon, huge distances, harsh climate. They desperately need things like all-season roads, reliable power grids, maybe even port upgrades to get resources out efficiently.
Right, you can have the minerals, but if you can't get them out.
Precisely. There was talk of this big Arctic corridor project to open up the north, but it seems to have stalled. Cost overruns, political hesitation. It's a major gap.
Okay, permitting, indigenous partnerships, infrastructure, anything else?
Yes, one more really critical piece. Downstream processing. Canada is still mostly digging stuff up and shipping it out raw or maybe semi-processed. The really high-value steps, turning lithium into battery-grade lithium hydroxide, separating rare earth into pure oxides, making graphite anodes for batteries, that stuff is still overwhelmingly done in Asia, mostly China and Korea.
So we're missing out on the value add.
We are. And think about permanent magnets, the super strong ones needed for EV motors and wind turbines. There isn't a single commercial scale plant making those anywhere in North America right now.
Not one.
Nope. So even if Canada mines the rare earths, they still have to be shipped elsewhere to become those finished high-value components. That's a major weakness in building a truly independent supply chain.
Okay, that's a sobering list of challenges.
Yeah.
Given all that, the permitting, indigenous rights, infrastructure, processing gaps, what's a realistic timeline? When could Canada actually overcome these hurdles and start making a real dent globally?
Well, the forecast, assuming things go right, kind of breaks down into 3 phases. Right now, through maybe 2026 is what the report calls foundation building. This is all about fixing the permitting mess, finalizing investment deals with the EU and US, and really getting those indigenous partnerships structured properly, laying the groundwork.
Makes sense. Phase 1.
Phase 2, maybe 2026 to 2028, is initial output. That's when we'd see those first big lithium and rare earth projects like Nemaska and SRC actually start producing significant volumes. And the first domestic processing facilities would hopefully come online then too.
Okay, so tangible results start appearing.
Right. Then the really big push, phase 3, is strategic scale-up, running from about 2028 to 2032. This is where you'd see, hopefully, a full Canadian supply chain taking shape from the mine through refining all the way to making battery materials and maybe even magnets domestically. That's when Canada could become a truly major player in EV and clean tech supply chains globally.
That sounds ambitious, especially hitting that 2032 timeframe.
It is ambitious. It requires pretty decisive action across the board. It's a tight window, no doubt, but the analysis suggests it's potentially doable.
So what needs to happen? What are the key strategic actions Canada needs to take to actually meet that timeline, to make sure it doesn't just stay stuck as a resource exporter?
Okay, several things are critical. Policy and regulation first. They absolutely need to streamline that permitting process, maybe digital tracking systems, firm deadlines for decisions. The report suggests something like a critical minerals fast lane, kind of like reforms to the U.S. environmental review process, NEPA, to speed things up without sacrificing standards.
Right. Cut the red tape, but do it smartly.
Exactly. Then economically, incentives matter. Things like tax credits specifically targeted at building those downstream processing plants, the refineries, the battery component factories, and also making sure government bodies like Export Development Canada, EDC, and the new Critical Minerals Investment Corporation, CMIC, have the tools and mandate to provide financing to help Canadian miners scale up and export.
Okay, policy, economics. What about the international angle?
Geopolitically, strengthening alliances is key. Taking that existing U.S.-Canada Critical Minerals Action Plan and maybe turning it into a full-blown industrial treaty. something with real teeth and long-term commitment. And an interesting idea mentioned is framing Canada's Arctic resources as strategically important to NATO. The thinking is that could attract military investment in northern infrastructure roads, ports, which would also benefit mining.
Linking resource development to security needs. That's clever.
It could be a way to unlock funding, yeah. And finally, absolutely crucial, is the Indigenous partnership piece. The focus really needs to shift fully to equity-based partnerships, meaning First Nations and Metis groups aren't just consulted, they're co-owners, co-managers, with clear environmental, cultural, and revenue-sharing agreements built in right from the start. That's fundamental for long-term success and stability.
So if Canada manages to pull all this off, what does it mean? What are the bigger implications? Why should, someone listening outside Canada care deeply about whether this succeeds or not? What's the real so what?
Oh, the implications are huge, truly global. For North America, success means Canada can anchor a secure continental supply chain for clean technology. It aligns perfectly with U.S. goals under the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, and shores up defense supply chains, too. It builds resilience for the whole continent.
Right, less reliance on uncertain sources.
Exactly. For key allies in the Indo-Pacific, like Japan, Korea, Australia, it means access to reliable, non-Chinese sources of critical minerals. That directly reduces their vulnerability to Beijing's economic coercion, which is a massive strategic benefit for them.
And for Europe.
For Europe, it's huge for their green transition. Their car makers, battery manufacturers, they get supply chain security. And crucially, they get access to minerals sourced under high environmental and social governance, or ESG standards. That's increasingly non-negotiable for European consumers and regulators.
Okay, so benefits for key allies. What about more broadly?
Well, there's a potential positive model here for the Global South, too. If Canada can demonstrate truly ethical, inclusive mineral development with strong environmental protections and genuine benefits for local and Indigenous communities, that sets a powerful example. It shows responsible resource extraction is possible, which could influence practices worldwide.
So bringing this all together, it really feels like Canada's at a crossroads, doesn't it?
Absolutely. A critical juncture.
You have the West urgently trying to diversify away from China's dominance in these minerals. You have the green energy transition demanding vast amounts of them. And Canada seems to have this unique trifecta: the resources underground, a stable political system with rule of law, and, generally, a high level of trust on the world stage.
That's exactly it. But the window is now. The next 5 years, maybe a bit longer, are absolutely pivotal. This period will really determine if Canada steps up and becomes that critical mineral superpower, anchoring a secure, democratic supply chain, or if it kind of fumbles the opportunity and remains just a place with a lot of potential locked in the ground.
A vault of untapped potential, as the report puts it.
Yeah. Decisive action now could transform that mineral wealth.
Yeah.
It's not just about economic benefits for Canada, though those are significant. It's about gaining real global influence, contributing to strategic security in what's clearly becoming a much more multipolar, competitive world.
Okay, so a huge opportunity, but also huge challenges, which leads us to a final thought for you, our listener. Considering this really complex balancing act between the economic opportunity, the environmental responsibilities, the crucial importance of Indigenous rights and partnership, and the global security dimension, what do you think is the single most critical factor? The one thing Canada absolutely has to get right to unlock its full potential in this critical minerals race? Something to ponder. We'll leave you with that.